Hello and welcome to Living Science. Today we have with us a very distinguished scientist, Professor VijayRaghavan. He is the current Secretary of Department of Biotechnology, DBT, India. Through social media, Dr. Raghavan has established a direct contact with students. He answers all the queries raised by students and regularly updates them on recent developments in DBT. Students find Dr. Raghavan very approachable and easy to talk to. At DBT, Dr. Raghavan has also been responsible for establishing many international collaborations, which have resulted in new research opportunities for students, postdoctoral fellows, and scientists to address very challenging problems in biological sciences. For his own work, Dr. Raghavan has focused on understanding the sequential development in sensory and locomotive organs in fruit fly or Drosophila melanogaster. Before joining DBT, he has served as the director of NCBS Bangalore. He has received numerous awards for his outstanding contributions to science. Just to name the few, he was awarded with Padma Shri by Government of India in 2013. Infosys Prize in Life Science category in 2009 and Shanti Suru Bhatnagar Award for Science and Technology in 1998. Dr. Raghavan, very welcome. We are happy that you are with us today. So our very first question to you is this. You are a trained chemical engineer. So how is that you ended up working in the very basic science research area?
First of all, thank you very much for having me here. It's fantastic that you have this program, and I've just heard about the many people you've had before, and it's really invigorating, I'm sure, for all of us to have you communicate science and interactions with scientists both through this program as well as on the web afterwards. So thank you. Now, you asked me about what made me move from more applied work to basic science. So a couple of quick points over here. Firstly, the kind of engineering education which I had, I was extraordinarily fortunate that it had a very strong foundation in what was called engineering science, but also in physics, chemistry, and mathematics. So that was really very, very fortunate. But the other matter is that, all of us, when we start our college education, one of the principal aspects which drives us and our families is a term which is used in India. It's called, you're taking up this particular course, uska scope kya hai? Agar scope nahi hai to kyun kare? And when I was growing up, the scope was in plastics. Yeah. So सब लोग बोलते थे कि chemical engineering चलो और करो, scope बहुत है plastics में, right? And that was the reason you went. And it was an interesting thing because, for example, even earlier, much earlier in Europe during the Second World War and before that, chemical engineering was an area which attracted many people because of the growth of the chemical industry at that time, not plastics. But many of the scientists who went on into physics and mathematics came trained in chemical engineering. And chemical engineering is unusual because it has fluid mechanics, mathematics and everything, but also allows you to escape into science. So I think the short statement I would give is engineering, medicine, economics, finance are things which your parents want you to take up, and rightly because they have good job opportunities, but they also allow an escape for those of us who are subversive, who are interested in doing something different, to go into that place. Your parents continue to think that you're doing something useful, but you can escape into some intellectual adventure without them knowing for a while. And if you succeed, then all is well. But you have to actually succeed in your escape.
Very well. So a lot of your research is basic science, and we'll get to your work in a little while. And so first is your area of expertise, developmental biology, right? And so we would like to know what's the status of India when you compare with the developed world in terms of developmental biology, in terms of research, how well are we doing in this area? Considering this is a very hard topic to work on because of a lot of complications, because you're trying to understand life here, and the questions are straightforward, answers are very difficult to find. So
Yeah, first of all, I'd like to say, just last year, I attended the meeting of two meetings. One was the Indian Society for Developmental Biology, another one for the cell biology meeting. And it was absolutely extraordinary to look. I mean, I hadn't been for both these meetings for many years. And it's absolutely extraordinary to see the change from about 10 years before, and certainly from 10, 20 years before. The number of developmental biologists, cell biologists, I also attended another meeting in Drosophila biology. The number of groups are, tenfold more. So there are a very large number of groups. The quality of the posters and talks has increased hugely, right? And so this has resulted in excellence being seen in a larger number of people, but the median quality of the work actually being quite good and quite high. So that's dramatic. And the question is, why has that happened? I think it's, of course, one reason is that the growth of the community in general, that's not been, insignificant. That number has grown, number of schools and colleges and universities have all grown. But there's been actually a dramatic revolution which has made cell and developmental biology, and putting them together, as being attractive. And these are revolutions in genetics, in molecular biology, in imaging, in the use of model organisms, which actually resulted in a large number of Indians going into these areas in the previous 10, 15, 20 years, who have now come back and started groups and are developing. So there's an exponential increase. So overall, I think the quality of Indian developmental biology is much higher. We are still a very small number compared to the world community. The number of excellent cell biologists and developmental biologists are still too small for a country of our size. But given the high level of international competition and the very small amount of money which we've invested, for the amount of money we've invested, I think we've done extraordinarily well.
So the question is, first, like how you pick this model organism to work with, and then your contribution is significant in understanding the process of myogenesis in early stages of Drosophila fruit fly. So if you can share a little bit of your work.
Yeah, I trained as a chemical engineer, as I said, and then I was planning to go abroad to do my PhD, but I actually fell rather ill with tuberculosis and had a gap year. And when I was recovering, I was working at the All India Institute of Medical Sciences in the biochemistry department because I happened to know a friend over there. And so nothing to do, I had done no biology before. I'd done some biomedical engineering, but I've never done a biology course in my life. And at that time in the biochemistry department of All India Institute, I read a book by on a conference proceedings in which Ubaid Siddiqui had written an article. It was a reproductive biology conference, but unusually he was invited to give a seminar, a talk outside that region. And I read a paper on Drosophila genetics, neurogenetics by him. And because I no knew biology, I couldn't understand any of the other articles, but genetics being a little more formal and closer to, doesn't require, biology as it were, I actually understood that paper. I was fascinated. So I wrote to Ubaid Siddiqui at TIFR. I was admitted for my PhD program. Then I switched over to biology without knowing anything about it. It wasn't an informed decision at all. It was as poorly informed as my going to chemical engineering because plastics has a future. I thought I'll do biology because I'll understand the brain. And I had no data to believe that, one could understand the brain by doing Drosophila neurogenetics, but I just liked it, so I went.
Some of your papers are actually landmark, and they've kind of they tell different story than what is generally perceived about.
Well, I should say before I'll be happy to tell you a little bit about the work from our lab, but I must say that there are three kinds of excellent science. One which, brilliant people pursue, and I certainly don't fall into that category. And the second is what brilliant people do in leading teams and getting work done, and I don't fall into that category. And the third is when you're fortunate to have a brilliant set of students and postdocs, and interesting things happen because of the place you are in. And the Tata Institute of Fundamental Research in NCBS has been a wonderful place which has allowed brilliant students and postdocs to come and do work. And I've been lucky to be a participant there. So when I talk about our work, I mean their work, and I mean over a period of time something really interesting has happened. But that's because of this team for which, everyone's role has been very important and not an individual's. That said, we embarked on a question to try and understand how muscles are made, and the reason was that the muscles we thought was a simpler way of understanding the nervous system. It's an electrically excitable tissue, but it's not as complicated as the brain. But that turned out to be fascinating because our understanding of how muscles are made went on from how you have cells which fuse to form muscles, how that takes place in the flight muscles, but also how these muscle cells attach to tendons, how they are innervated by the nervous system. So our idea was to understand the biology of a system, right? Using the tools of molecular and cell biology and developmental biology, and importantly genetics. What happened over the years simultaneously was that these tools become extraordinarily versatile. You could actually manipulate any gene you wanted at any time you wanted, overexpress it or knock it down. You could knock it down in muscles and tendons in the nervous system cells. You could follow these cells during development. You could actually see how they interact to get function. And so it was really amazing how much one could do in understanding how a tissue is made and functions if you focused on the biology of one component. And the lesson I would say is today, when data is more and more easily available, whether it's microarrays or mass spectrometry or genome data, all of that is important. It's vital to have big data, but you must combine that with a deep understanding of biology in a particular topic you're interested in. You cannot understand the nervous system only by getting data from genes expressed there and when they're expressed and how they're expressed and so on, but you need to understand the nervous system at the right level of abstraction. In addition to understanding the muscle, we collaborated a lot with the laboratory of Veronica Rodriguez in trying to understand the brain, particularly the olfactory system, and later on understanding how the motor system also develops. But in all of these, it's been actually fascinating to see how by constantly getting better and better at understanding a system, but being open about where different interactions from other areas come from, we've been very lucky in getting a better view of what's happening. Very recently, we've discovered that the way muscles are made are by the asymmetric division of stem cells, as well as a previous step in development where there's a symmetric division, and that it looks very likely that there are satellite cells in muscle in flies as they are in vertebrates. And this opens up a huge way of looking at the mechanisms by which one can understand muscle damage and repair.
Actually, Dr. Raghavan, you were always humble about your achievements, because one of the prize Dr. Raghavan got, and he mentioned that I got this because I associated with people smarter than I am.
That's very easy for some people. For other people, it's difficult.
What is that about NCBS? It makes it an iconic basic research institute, and it's among the best in the country. So what is it that it's not lost? It's the original.
Well, I think there are the very important point about individuals, your laboratory group, and institutions, and even multiple sets of institutions, is we all have a huge set of problems which we have to grapple with. And particularly in India, those problems are much larger than elsewhere. And it's very easy to get caught every day in listing your problems. And that's important. And it's easy to get caught in solving your problems. And it's important to solve them. No one else is going to solve them. But we must, however difficult the day is, keep aside a small amount of the day in doing something which is forward-looking, right? Because all the exciting, good things we're doing today is someone 5 years, 10 years ago thought of doing something a little more than solving the problems they had. And as people, all of us who have had the luxury in this poor country of having any education or getting a salary, have also the responsibility of doing a little bit of forward-thinking work every day. Small, intermediate, big, that needs to be done. NCBS, for a complicated set of accidents, started doing that. Now, and that was good, and that's why it became a fantastic place, because that culture of trying to be adventurous is there. What happens when you have perceived success or real success in anything we do is we immediately want to preserve that. And that is the greatest mistake one can make. If you try to preserve something which you have, failure is guaranteed. If you try to be adventurous in this messy world, again, failure is almost guaranteed, right? But almost is different from completely guaranteed. There is a small chance you will succeed if you're adventurous, right? If you don't be adventurous, you will certainly fail. So it's a very difficult choice. What do? Do you stay and do nothing and protect everything? Or do you be adventurous and have a small chance of succeeding? Now that small chance of succeeding, is like buying one lottery ticket and you need at least hundreds of thousands to be guaranteed to win the lottery. What is the chance of buying one lottery ticket and succeeding? Very little. But given enough time, right, you buy a lottery ticket every year, you will win the lottery. But that's too slow. If you want to win a lottery ticket fast, right, either you buy lots of tickets and that's too expensive, right, or you wait a long time. But all of you together can effectively buy lots of tickets. So if there's a community buying of multiple tickets, you don't care if you win or you win or you win. That cultural attitude that I'm buying a ticket not because I will win, but all of us are buying tickets so that one of us will win, is a cultural attitude you need to have institutionally. You must feel that the other person's success is important. Now if you go a little bit beyond, if you say, as a successful institution, I want to buy tickets, ensure that the whole country buys tickets. I want to have meetings and workshops and interactions and work with the new stem cell institute next to me and help that integration better and have a structure where, incubators can come and grow. Then the whole ecosystem now is buying many tickets. So you have two choices there. Succeed by buying one lottery ticket and live for 200 or 300 years, and hope that you will win a prize. You will win if you will live for 200 or 300 years. But you say, I live intellectually for 5 years, but the entire ecosystem is now going to buy tickets, and then you'll win. So it's really a cultural shift you have to make. Because if you look at the hard data, the chances of succeeding are very difficult. But it's only by working together that we can ensure that that happens. So it's really a cultural issue and not one of money or this or that and so on, all of which are a consequence and they follow.
And you've definitely contributed to that culture because you have also served as a director of NCBS before joining DBT, right? So how hard was it for you, or it was just, and then what does it take to be a successful director or administrator?
Well, very importantly, first of all, the culture at NCBS, and I think that should be true of every academic place, is you shouldn't call the head the director, you should call the head not the director. Because the way academic environments are, they're much more interactive, and the director's role is merely, it's an important role. It's a role of protecting the institution from outside interference and conveying to the outside that all is well, even when things are troublesome, so that there's time to recover. Those are important roles, but that's a collective responsibility. Internally, in an academic environment, the director should be irrelevant, right, in terms of functioning, the way she or he functions and so on and so forth. And that environment has been there at NCBS for a long time and continues there. I mean, my own personal point is that, we, a band of us, were involved in setting up NCBS, not me by any means, alone. And we worked together, starting from scratch, and we were like frogs in a pot being slowly heated, and we didn't know that we were stretching ourselves, doing our science and administration and this and that. If we had known that this is what is going to happen, we may not have embarked on it. We were so unaware of the size of the challenge we had taken up that we actually took it up. So it wasn't a considered view, right? And when you have a considered option, you're usually scared about it. We were stupid enough to embark on an adventure without knowing the complications, and we just lived through that.
And you took baton from the legend in Indian science, Dr. Obaid Siddiqui. So I think this has two parts. So how has he influenced you as an administrator and as a scientist, and how was it was for you to work with him?
So Obaid was, had a very accessible, interactive approach. And see, there were three phases of Obaid Siddiqui we must keep in mind in India. One is building up apart from his science, which is very important. One is building up the molecular biology unit, now called the Department of Biological Sciences at TIFR. The second is building up NCBS. And then he actually retired as NCBS director. He was there for a relatively short period from 92 to 96, right? And then he was as a bigger mentor from 1996 onwards. So it's a very long period. There are three different phases, and there are three different Obaids there. In the molecular biology unit, and in all three phases, he was very accessible to students and postdocs and everyone. In the molecular biology unit, he was an extraordinarily protective force post-Homi Bhabha in a manner which prevented the regression to the mean of the quality of the molecular biology unit. People always don't like exceptionalism or excellence. They're much more comfortable with everyone being the same, and there's a tendency, if you're trying to do something special, to pull you towards the mean, right? And in Bombay at the Tata Institute, the mathematics department school resisted that, astronomy and astrophysics resisted that, and biology resisted that. And all three because they had very strong leaders who prevented the regression to the mean. And that, I'm being very frank and blunt, that was very vital. Similarly, with radio astronomy, the way Govind Swarup started the radio telescope projects, Obaid started the National Center for Biological Sciences. And there's this interesting view that, the attitude of communities, our scientific community, people outside, people everywhere else, is you already have one of one kind, why do you need another? You already have CCMB, why do you need NCBS? The point is, this is a huge country and you need many of every kind, not just one of each kind. And Obaid was very strong and resilient. I mean, he did not budge in conveying the importance of this very effectively to government and helping and protecting the growth of NCBS. And in the third phase, as NCBS grew, even when he was not formally in charge, he actually, on one hand, interfered in nothing. On the other hand, he was very critical in a positive way of whatever you did. And so he was a really good, sounding board, and was extraordinarily supported when things worked out, and when things didn't work out, it was very helpful. So these three phases were very, very important. Apart from the fact that in his science, Obaid, maybe wrote literally 2 handfuls of good papers, but he had an influence on the field, first in bacterial and genetics and fungal genetics, and then in Drosophila neurogenetics, which is just enormous and completely disproportionate to the small number of papers he's written. So there are many ways of doing science, and he did that in a very particularly exciting way.
I mean, that can be an excellent example for all other research institutes So, do you think it's true for other research institutes in India too, that we are able to maintain the idea we started? Because since you are a DVT secretary, so we can probably ask you. So, do you, because NCBS to some extent is able to protect itself and maintain the ideology it started with, and then the core values.
Each place has its many weaknesses, and the NCBS, the Bangalore ecosystem certainly has its share of weaknesses. Bangalore is an extraordinary location for excellence in science, as is Pune, as Delhi in many ways, and each one is different, and each one has its strengths and weaknesses. And I would be very careful in thinking that we must each be like the other. I mean, there are differences which are very, very important, and therefore are complementary. Just as a joke, Obaid was a very lean person, and I wanted to be as lean as him, and I used to follow him and eat exactly what he ate at the lunch queue. But I put on a huge amount of weight, and he kept lean. So it doesn't help imitating. You have to be yourself and do what you need to do in science also. I mean, NCBS is what it is. How do we deal with our ecosystem? Our ecosystem, each of our ecosystems, is a complex state of our history, our current state, what we need to do with, and so on. But it's a very simple issue, the solution. Who is to blame, quote unquote blame, for our situation, and who can solve our problems? As long as we think it is someone outside who is to blame and someone outside who can solve our problems, we will be stuck in the same position. There is no one who can help us but ourselves, right? When you go to a government or your board or an outside agency saying you want to do their help to do something exciting, they love it and they'll talk to you for hours on end. But if you go to your governing council, your board, or to the government and say, my institute is a mess, I have a problem, this is not working, that's not working, can you solve this? They listen to you. In 30 seconds they start getting depressed, the meeting ends and you're gone. So you must, that doesn't mean that you don't have problems. You must learn tactically to look at the solution of your problems as a necessary requirement to do the many wonderful things which you have planned, and learn how to convey that well to various agencies. They must see value in helping you, as opposed to you being a headache which will go away if they throw some money at it, right? And that's an internal job. No one can do it from outside. You must be enthusiastic, you must be happy, and you must say, look, with all our problems we're doing this, now help us in this way, and we will do greater stuff. And that's a real big internal challenge. How do you stay proactive, energetic, forward-looking in difficult times? But really, that if we can solve that in each of our contexts, we would be able to solve many problems, and that's not easy. There's no one answer in a generic way,
So it's an individual responsibility of an institute, and
I would absolutely come back to what I said earlier. We all have to deal with our problems. We deal with the urgent, but we must take some time every day to deal with the important, which is not urgent. Deal with some important matter every day, which is not urgent. Then, that makes, it may not work out, but it has the potential of changing your ecosystem over some time. You're doing this, this kind of a program, right? Other institutions don't do, right?
it's not easy.
It's not easy. Yeah, it's easy not to do it.
Yes.
Yeah, and you could be doing something else.
Yes.
I could be doing something else. I can look at my watch and say, files to sign, run away. Why am I coming 20 kilometers to come to a discussion, right? But these are exactly the kinds of things which one doesn't know. This is playing the lottery. It could change me, it could change you, it could change the people who view it, for the better, for the worse. They'll learn from our mistakes at least.
So do you think it's, as a scientific community, to look at, translate the ideas too, because we have talked about importance of basic research, that is definitely its own values, but as a developing nation or even any nation also needs to translate its ideas. So when it comes to that, how proactive are we in India in translating? Because the general consensus, what you read and learn from scientific community, is that our bio entrepreneur, we are not as strong as we could have been. So what is your thought?
Well, I mean, the question is, what can we do, or are we doing enough, or is entrepreneurship in the life sciences sufficient and translation sufficient? And the short answer is no. Things are not sufficient. We can do a lot more. Because life science and its impact on society can be enormously transformative, right? And in India, we have had, in my opinion, three major conceptual roadblocks to implement quality translation in the life sciences. Right? Let me tell you two of them which are not problems of our community, and one which is our problem as scientists. The first is our infrastructure, and that needs to improve a lot to make it easier for us to get certain kinds of things done. I mean, if you build up as an entrepreneur your laboratory, then access to electricity, water, power, equipment, resources, and so on, that needs to be better, and that in some ways is an addressable problem. The second problem is the regulatory sphere, the ease of doing business, the ease in our ecosystem for you to start a company and to shut it down, the ease of regulation in terms of using for clinical trials, various other kinds of research regulations and so on. That's also something which is improving, is addressable. The principal and the most difficult matter is us, for the following reason. And this is again something which we need to see. If tomorrow both these were magically addressed, right, how many of us are going to become entrepreneurs, right? Not many. And why is that? And that's because of a certain mindset in the way we do our science. But that mindset can change. Our mindset as scientists is to principally take the best problems which have been defined in the West, right, and address those problems here to the best we can. We do a good job of that and train quality students and postdocs who go to the best labs in India and abroad and address the best problems defined in the West and come back and train quality postdocs and students who do that and cycle. We don't have the best centers of excellence, the global centers of excellence here, they're elsewhere, and we have become better and better at addressing those problems better and better, but not at the top level, because we need to be in that center of excellence to address it at that level. So what do? I wouldn't for a moment say that we should stop what we're doing. What we're doing is fantastic, because we, as one of the few post-colonial countries, have got extraordinary people because of this training mechanism. We can actually address and solve all our problems because of this, right? But in addition to this, what we need to do is now, because of our foundation, look around our ecosystem and define new problems which can be global problems which excite people from anywhere in the world, right? We can do that by taking on a challenge and solving a problem. We can do basic science, we can do applied stuff, but our ecosystem should inspire us to solve problems, getting the centers of excellence from all over the world to interact with us. So again, just as I advocated earlier that we must buy many lottery tickets because we can't wait for so long for one ticket to win, we similarly can't wait for so long to build a center of excellence here. It will take us 50 or 100 years. We must interact internationally, defining problems defined by us and solve them and push that. So a major vaccine initiative should be led by us. Antimicrobial resistance programs should be led by us. Marine biology initiative should be led by us. If you want to have a big physics problem, let's try to lead it and have it over here. But have it partnered internationally so we can bring resources and a critical mass of intellect. So I think that issue if we address, and that's again up to us to address, then the entrepreneurship situation can change dramatically. It's changing in other areas, of engineering and technology, and it can change in biology very rapidly because we have brilliant people. Tomorrow, if you want to start a company, don't necessarily say, what have I done which I can take into application here? Just say, what's an interesting question? What do I need to do it? I partner with someone here, I partner with someone in Sweden, someone else in Africa. The solution may be applicable in South America, but I'm going to be a global quality problem solver if I want to become an entrepreneur, and that can be done. Otherwise, we will constantly be worried about, unless this and this is done, I can't become an entrepreneur. And that's true, but that's a lazy solution.
But that's a very practical solution actually to tackle this situation. But I think you kind of brought me, fast forwarded me. I was going to ask this question and I'm going to bring you back to this. First is, because a lot of us feel that in India, and I'm going to come to bi-entrepreneur later, that the postdoctoral cultural is kind of lacking. And then a lot of time students are kind of forced to make this choice that after PhD you get some experience, and a lot of time for whatever reason you don't want to go. And it seems like situation to us is not kind of improving. That
yeah, I think again the change for these kinds of things come from two ecosystem changes. One, the critical mass of the ecosystem has to go up. That's happening. We have more and more new institutions with a desperate need for quality people, right? And so there's opportunity there. Now, why is it that people want to go abroad for their postdoc? Now, you could go backwards a bit and ask, why is it that people are not a significant number of people go abroad for their PhD, but many stay on here? Why is that? The reason why many people do their PhD in India is because there are avenues open for a PhD program here, right, which were not there earlier. The quality of our postdoctoral programs need to ramp up hugely, and that has to be driven internally, right? For example, we have the Welcome Trust DBT India Alliance Early Career Fellowships. Only now, after a 10-year period, are we getting more and more applicants. Right? Those allow you to do 2 years of postdocs here and 2-year postdoc abroad in a collaborator's lab. But out of 40 fellowships each year, the first few years had very few applicants, literally 4 or 5 quality applicants. And the reason is not your fault as PhD students. The reason is that investigators in our laboratories, our PIs, are not actively advertising and saying, I have a postdoctoral position, right? They don't push that, right? And if there's a demand from our investigators that we need strong, high quality postdoctoral programs, and then when I sit on a faculty recruiting committee in another institute, I will say that, a postdoc, I will judge the work and not where the postdoc has come from, then, you're changing the culture. So it's us who have to change the culture. We're taking a lazy way out if we, instead of reading the paper, instead of seeing what work is done, if we say, this person has come from X or Y or Z place, so I'll take her. Now, the other side of it is, as students, when we want to go for postdocs, and this is a distressing situation, it's sort of a global situation. Quite often when you ask students who are finishing what they want to do, they won't tell you that this is the scientific question we want to address, right? You're so burnt out at the end of your PhD that you say, I want to go for a postdoc, and that is the answer you get, right? Where do you want to go for a postdoc? To a place which has a fellowship for me, right? You haven't explored the range of competitive fellowships available. You haven't made quality time to say, this is what I want to work on for the rest of my career. This is what I'm driven by. If you did that in your 3rd year, okay, your PhD takes 5 years or more, but those are things you must be thinking about while you're doing a PhD. Just as I said, you must save time for the important and not just for the urgent. Save time to think about your future. That these are the choices 1, 2, and 3 which I like. A postdoc is 1, entrepreneurship is another, science journalism is a 3rd. I want to become a legal person 4th, and explore that in some depth. Make time for that. Make time for things which are interesting, which are distinct from your day-to-day lab work. Making that time makes your lab work more exciting and actually doesn't cut away from it, strangely. But being 24/7 in the lab, I mean, periodic bursts are fine, makes you less of a complete person. So we need to make ourselves as more complete people. We need to push our PIs to become more complete people and think of our careers beyond that and have them push for a postdoctoral culture. So this is a cultural change which we need to bring in, and we're not doing that. One final point about postdocs. Having a culture which requires you to go outside your city, outside your institutional complex, and that as a requirement that you go to X lab and spend a postdoc and come, is seriously discriminatory against women. Effectively, it makes particularly in societies like India, it makes extraordinary demands without actually changing the ecosystem in a manner which makes those demands reasonable. So particularly our family structure, our environment, our demands require us to be a little more flexible about these kinds of, a lot more flexible about these kinds of issues. And that is a demand which you should make to funding agencies and the government and so on, that if you have a program, for example, that requires a postdoctoral fellowship program, which is a national one, which says you have to go outside your city and so on, have flexibility which allows gender balance to actually grow.
Population is not mobile in India between institutes, so people are willing to go abroad for postdoc.
No, that's an important,
even men.
It's an important
you will
issue.
not see NCBS student coming to ICGB or ICGB going for postdoc. And if we encourage that, probably you can have
we need to push, exactly, that's what I'm saying. That kind of interaction has to be done at the graduate level or postdoctoral level, keeping in mind that as we get more and more excellent institutions or institutions of quality, for a variety of reasons, people may not want to move. I mean, the issue about developing more of a postdoc culture where you move between themes and labs within India is, again, at its core, an intellectual issue which can be changed by students and the investigators in an institutional environment. What is the conversation about one's future, right? That conversation is minimal in our spaces. Our space, our intellectual conversations are rather narrow about what we are doing. Again, this meeting which you've had, this discussion is unusual, right? The environments where you go up and down the hierarchy, for whatever it's worth, it's there, as opposed to our regular interactions within our level, this cross interactions are very important. So you must not hesitate to interact with other PIs in the institute, PIs in neighboring institutes, with the government, with politicians. All of that interaction is very important. For example, you are here at the ICGEB. Next to you is the NII and the NIPGR. Next to you is JNU, and then you have IIT and AIMS. This can be an extraordinary world-class ecosystem where, supposing for some reason, I am not the type who wants to go abroad for anything at all.
Yes.
Right? This could be like me in New York, I'm in Delhi, I want to stay in this ecosystem. And I can get the best in the world and be open. It's true, it will be terrific if I go to New York, but it's also terrific, it should be fine if I stay here. Right? It's true that if I work on something other than what I do for my PhD, it can help broaden my attitude. But if I'm so passionate that that's the right thing I want to do and I want to take it with me, well, it's my life, I should, play around. So there's no view that this is right or that is right. It falls into, if everyone were to do only what they did in their PhD, that would be very silly. But everyone falls on a spectrum of various kinds of choices. Some do this, some do that.
While I agree totally with you that it's a very personal choice and you can move out of your comfort zone and make this, but from administration point of what institutes and DBT can do to encourage more moving between and gaining, because now actually you'll agree a lot of institutes are doing as good science as anywhere in the world.
Sure. No, I think the main issue there, again, for One is for people in general and the other for women in particular. Both of these require a attention to the campus environment, right? And we don't pay enough attention to that. We seem to think that as individuals, our family life and our social life can fit in seamlessly anywhere we are in the country, right? And it's true that we share many things in common with each other from Kashmir to Kanyakumari. But it's also true that there are challenges. If I come from a small village from a rural area, fitting into an urban setting in a faraway place is difficult, right? I might therefore tend to be closer to my kind of comfort zone. So our campuses must become much more user-friendly for the diversity which we are, right? Do we have a superb creche on the campus? Do we have healthcare on the campus? Do we have accommodation for, we talk about ourselves as students, right? But we are full-grown adults, right? We may want to have families, we have parents to come in. Is our campus accommodation of that quality, or is a city that user-friendly that we can rent accommodation there? Those are huge challenges. So I think those challenges, when addressed in a campus, and these are very difficult to address in a campus because administration and government thinks about these as luxuries and benefits. But that is the core, right? When I walk into an institute, I feel, wow, this is a place I want to work in. If these things are addressed, the canteen is fantastic, I can mix with people and talk, right? The laboratories are great in many, many places, but these other matters will attract mobility. At the next higher level, about faculty and so on, there too the mobility is poor, and there is our bureaucracy is bad. It's very difficult for me to leave a structure in one institute and go into another because the benefits package, this, that, the retirement packages are met. The government has made a fantastic flexible rule which now says you can be on lien from your institute for a 10-year period, right? So basically your system of having your benefits package in a system which is very different from where you're going to can still be kept. But we need to actually tweak that and make that better and better. So the short answer is, if we improve our institutional culture to make it attractive for people to come and stay and work, both intellectually but also in terms of the environment otherwise, it will be very good. And I can see how IIT Guwahati or Tezpur University or someplace in the new ISER in Tirupati can be very attractive. ISER Pune is an example. It's built a campus which is attractive, right? ISER Mohali is another example. And these are places, more and more of them are coming up, and I think wonderful things will happen.